Welcome to the National University online class. During this pandemic, I feel proud to be the part of this National University online class lecture as a resource person. Please maintain the health rules. This lecture is for the students of Honours Third Year. We will talk about Elizabethan and Jacobean drama, and your paper code is 231101. Now we are going to discuss the Duchess of Malfi. John Webster was an English Jacobean dramatist. He has been regarded as a famous tragic writer in English literature. We do not have enough information about him. What we know about him is very little. The dates of his birth and death are unknown. He was Shakespeare's contemporary. It is thought that he was born not earlier than 1570 and not later than 1580. Probably he was born in 1580. It is likely that he was born not long after in or near London. His father also named John Webster. Probably he was a carriage maker, and the name of his mother was Elizabeth. She was a daughter of a blacksmith. It is thought that Webster attended the reputable Merchant Taylors' School in London, but it is uncertain if he attended the school or not. We come to know that in 1605 he married Sarah Peniel, who was 17 years old. It is known that their first child, John Webster III, was baptized on 8 March 1608. We also come to know that they had several children. However, when we come to talk about his works, we are on a firm ground. We find some evidence that he was an actor for some time, but at the same time, some critics question the authenticity of it. He began his career collaborating with other playwrights. In 1604 with John Marston, he wrote The Malcontent, and in 1607 with Thomas Dekker, he wrote Westward Ho. He wrote The White Devil, a tragedy that was published in 1612, but the date of composition of the tragedy is uncertain. He wrote The Devil's Law Case. It was published in 1623, and it was probably performed for the first time in 1620. He wrote The Duchess of Malfi. However, he is best known for writing the tragedies The White Devil and The Duchess of Malfi. They are regarded as masterpieces of the early 17th century English stage. We also come to know about some non-dramatic writings of him. We come to know from a reference to him in the past tense in a 1634 publication that he was dead by that year. The Duchess of Malfi was written by English dramatist John Webster in between 1612 and 1613. It is a Jacobean revenge tragedy. It was originally published as the tragedy of the Duchess of Malfi. However, the Duchess of Malfi was first performed privately at the Blackfriars Theatre, then later to a larger audience at the Globe in between 1613 and 1614. The play was published in 1623. The source of the play is in the narrative of The Palace of Pleasure by William Painter. The Palace of Pleasure was published in 1567, and it was based upon Histories Tragiques by Belforest, a French writer. And Belforest got the story from Bandello's Novelli. From the original story, we come to know that in 1490, a duchess was married. At the time of her marriage, she was only 12, and when she was 20 years old, her husband died. She secretly married Antonio. After their marriage, a child was born. But when the second child was born to them, there began to spread rumors. The Duchess had two brothers. They were Cardinal Lodovico and Carlo. The two brothers, in order to watch the Duchess, employed spies. Then we see the departure of Antonio with his two children to Ancona. At that time, she was again pregnant, and she also went to Ancona. However, to the family she revealed her marriage. Then she and her two children were banished from Ancona and Siena. Antonio went to Milan. He wanted to live there, but he was killed there. On the other hand, The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster tells the story of the brave Duchess. It tells the story of her love for Antonio. We see that the Duchess and Antonio marry secretly. She has 3 children, but she refuses to name the father. Eventually, they are betrayed by Bossola, who is a spy. The Duchess and her family flee, but they are intercepted. Antonio and the oldest child are able to escape. Ferdinand orders Bossola to kill the Duchess, her 2 younger children, and her maid. However, Ferdinand goes mad with guilt. We see that all are killed except for the eldest son of the Duchess. The main changes that Webster makes in the Duchess of Malfi are significant. Antonio does not die until a few years after the death of the Duchess. The repentance of Bossola and his ultimate betrayal and murder of the brothers is fictionalized. The Duchess of Malfi is often regarded as the last great tragedy of the Elizabethan and Jacobean era. It has plenty of blood, and it is usual in the tragedies of Renaissance period. The focus in the tragedy of Webster is on class or rank. We know that the tragedies of Webster are about a forbidden love, a forbidden marriage, and it ultimately leads to the deaths of the lovers and many others. The main themes are corruption, cruelty, deception, heroism, religion, class, and so on. The first act has a single scene. The act opens at the court in Malfi. Antonio meets Delio. He has returned from France after spending a long time. Antonio describes the French court to Delio. He admires the court for its foresight. He admires the court for taking effective steps to handle corruption. At this point, we notice the arrival of the Cardinal and Daniel de Bossola. Their arrival interrupts the conversation between Antonio and Delio. Bossola reminds the Cardinal of his service, and he bitterly complains about the lack of recompense of the Cardinal for the services of Bossola. In response, the Cardinal complains about the dishonesty of Bossola, and he leaves the place. Now Bossola complains to Antonio about the corruption of the Cardinal and his brother, Ferdinand. According to Bossola, they are also unjust. After the departure of Bossola, Antonio comments on his melancholy and discontent. Now, we notice the arrival of Ferdinand. We have already mentioned that he is the brother of the Cardinal and the Duchess of Malfi. He enters and involves in some court gossip with Silvio Castruccio and Rodrigo. Then we see the appearance of the Cardinal and the Duchess, who soon join Ferdinand and the others. Delio and Antonio talk about the character traits of Ferdinand and the Cardinal and exchange depressing remarks about them. We then come to know from Antonio about the contrast that we find in Duchess' character with that of her brothers. Ferdinand desires that his sister, the Duchess, will engage Bossola as her master of the horse, and the Duchess agrees. We have already known that the Cardinal does not like Bossola, but for this reason, he forbids his brother to be involved in this arrangement. Then Ferdinand expresses his expectation to Bossola that he will act as a spy in the household of the Duchess. Here Bossola will have to consider the particular attention to the wish of Ferdinand that the Duchess, who is a widow, will not get married again. Bossola, despite some cynical murmuring, agrees to work as Ferdinand wants. Before the departure of the two brothers, the Cardinal emphasizes once more to the Duchess that she should not marry again. Now we see the exchange of some comment between the Duchess and her maid, Cariola. The Duchess is sad, and she predicts that she is about to enter a pathless wilderness. Antonio re-enters, and the Duchess makes her love for him plain. He openly professes that she wishes to marry him. She also gives her wedding ring to Antonio. We know about the difference in their social status. Despite the social differences, they contract with each other as husband and wife. The first scene of Act 2 is set in an apartment in the Duchess' palace in Malfi. The scene begins with the entrance of Bossola and Castruccio. We notice some talk of court life between the two, but the entrance of an old lady interrupts them. Bossola severely criticizes her for her unattractive appearance. The old lady has tried to conceal her unattractive appearance by using cosmetics excessively. His insulting treatment of the women leads him to philosophize on the theme of physical corruption of the body and death that cannot be avoided. The two, Castruccio and the old lady, exit, but Bossola has something to do as he spies for Ferdinand. Bossola notices that the Duchess has signs of pregnancy. The signs include morning sickness and swelling. Bossola brings some apricots to know that she is really pregnant. He offers them to the Duchess. When Antonio and Delio enter, Bossola replies to their questions and comments with his customary cynicism and mocking. We see the entrance of the Duchess. She asks Antonio if she has got fat. She also says that she is short of breath. Then Bossola offers her the apricots, and the Duchess accepts them readily and eats them. And the fruits cause a reaction. She says that they have made her ill, and after that she goes off to her bedroom. Antonio and Delio discuss how to cover up that she has gone into labor, and Delio advises to spread the rumor that Bossola has poisoned the Duchess with the fruits. In the second scene of Act 2, the conclusion that Daniel de Bossola makes about the Duchess of Malfi is correct. She is pregnant. We notice the appearance of the old lady. Bossola hatefully criticizes her and women in general. Perhaps she has come to act as a midwife to the Duchess. Now we see that Antonio, Delio, Rodrigo, and Grisolan enter. Antonio tells them to shut and lock the court gates. He tells them that some of the jewels of the Duchess are missing. There spreads a rumor that the Duchess has a Swiss mercenary in her bedroom with her. Antonio issues orders for security. He tells that due to the illness of the Duchess and the theft of her jewels, she would like all the officers to lock themselves in their rooms. Everyone agrees and leaves the place except Antonio and Delio. Fearful of his safety, Antonio tells Delio to go to Rome so that he can keep watch over the brothers of the Duchess. Now Delio affirms his friendship for and loyalty to Antonio. At this point, we notice the entrance of Cariola, who announces to Antonio that he is now the father of a son. From scene 3, we come to know about the outcry of women from the direction of the Duchess' chambers. It makes him doubtful about the order of Antonio to confine the officers to their rooms. Now Bossola meets Antonio, and we find a horoscope of a child in Antonio's hand. Antonio is now nervous. We come to know about the explanation of Antonio in this regard. He explains that he has got the horoscope to find out the thief who has stolen the jewels of the Duchess. Antonio also wants to know the reason of Bossola's movement around the palace. Then we find the accusations and counter-accusations between the two. We come to know that Antonio calls him a traitor. On the other hand, Bossola calls Antonio a false steward. The threat of Antonio towards Bosola to have him dismissed from his post cannot make Bosola afraid. Antonio gets a nosebleed suddenly, and it is considered a bad omen. Before his departure, Antonio warns Bosola not to go near the chamber of the Duchess. We see that Bosola picks up the horoscope that Antonio has dropped. Bosola comes to know that the Duchess has given birth to a child, and Antonio is in her confidence, but he doesn't realize that Antonio is the father of the child. He plans to send a letter to the brothers who are in Rome. Scene 4 is set in Rome. The cardinal is having a talk with Julia. Julia is the wife of Castruccio and the mistress of the cardinal. Without considering the feeling of Julia, the cardinal speaks to her. We see that he accuses women of inconsistency and fickleness. The harsh words from the cardinal make Julia cry. He also accuses her of hypocrisy. According to the cardinal, Julia should be thankful to him. However, at this point, we notice the entrance of a servant who informs her of the arrival of her husband in Rome. He also informs her of a gentleman who has come here to meet Julia. The gentleman who has come to meet Julia is Delio. He courted Julia in the past. We come to know that Delio wants to hire Julia as his mistress. Speaking to Delio rudely, Julia goes away. After the departure of Julia, Delio expresses his fear regarding Antonio that he will have to face difficulties. In scene 5, the cardinal, accompanied by Ferdinand, enters his residence in Rome. They have read the letter that Bosola has sent to them. However, the letter reveals the birth of the child of the Duchess. Ferdinand would like to destroy the Duchess' palace, her general territory, and so on. On the other hand, the cardinal maintains an icy composure. He feels upset, but he tells Ferdinand to cool down. He cites him for his extreme emotional reactions. He declares that the bloodiness of their noble family has been disgraced. However, we come to know from Ferdinand that he will do nothing until he figures out who the father is. From the first scene of Act 3, we come to know that the setting returns to Malfi. Antonio welcomes Delio, who has come to Malfi from Rome after his long absence. Ferdinand has also come with him. 2 years have passed, and we come to learn that the Duchess of Malfi has given birth to 2 more children. Delio tells if the cardinal and Ferdinand know about the matter. In response, Antonio says that he thinks that they know. We see that Delio again wants to know about the reaction of the common people in Malfi. And Antonio now says that they call the Duchess a slut. He also mentions that no one in Malfi has any idea that they are married. Now, we see the entrance of Ferdinand and the Duchess. Ferdinand tells the Duchess that he has found a husband for her. And what we know about the husband that Ferdinand has chosen for the Duchess is that he is a nobleman named Count Malatesti. The Duchess refuses the proposal. She tells Ferdinand that he is only a sugar candy. The Duchess wants to talk to Ferdinand about a rumor. The Duke tells that he has full confidence in her. He also says that he will pardon her even if there is some truth in it. It helps the Duchess to relieve from fears. After the departure of the Duchess, the Duke tells that the sense of her guilt is troubling the Duchess. Boshola enters and he informs Ferdinand that the Duchess has 3 children, but he doesn't know who the father is. Now, from Boshola, the Duke obtains a false key to the chamber of the Duchess. Scene 2 introduces us with the chamber of the Duchess of Malfi. There, we notice the playful discussion between the Duchess and Antonio about whether he will spend the night with her. Cariola wants to know from Antonio about her love life. Antonio answers her with an elegant allusion to ancient Greek mythology and human traits. However, they leave the Duchess to herself. Ferdinand enters with a dagger. There, he uses fearsome language and he calls the Duchess a vile woman. Ferdinand gives a long lecture and bids farewell. He says that he will never see her again. He leaves the place, keeping the dagger. Now Antonio and Cariola re-enter. They have witnessed the heated exchange between the Duchess and Ferdinand. Suddenly there is a knocking on the door. After knowing from Cariola that the visitor is Boshola, the Duchess orders Antonio to flee and he leaves the place. The Duchess fabricates a story so that she can explain her distress. She says that Antonio has cheated and certain sums of money are missing. Then the Duchess asks Boshola to summon the officers of the palace. After the departure of Boshola, we notice the reappearance of Antonio. The Duchess orders him to flee to Ancona urgently. She will meet him there. However, in the presence of Boshola and the servants, she criticizes Antonio and bids him leave her household. After some discussion with the officers, the Duchess wants to know the opinion from Boshola about Antonio, and he speaks about Antonio's virtue. He praises him. Now, her impulsiveness makes the Duchess declare that Antonio is her husband and father of her 3 children. She also tells Boshola about her plan to join Antonio to Ancona. The Duchess accepts the suggestion of Boshola that she should pretend that she is going on a long journey to the nearby shrine of Loreto. Scene 3 is again set at Rome. We are now at the palace of the Cardinal. We come to know about the discussion of the Cardinal and Ferdinand with Count Malatesti and other noblemen about the Count's taking on a military command. Delio and Silvio comment on the weakness of Malatesti as a soldier. After arriving, Boshola speaks to Ferdinand and the Cardinal privately. He reports to them about the Duchess of Malfi and Antonio Bologna. On the other hand, the others discuss what his presence there can mean. It is noted that Ferdinand and the Cardinal look furious in reaction to whatever Boshola is telling them. Ferdinand and the cardinal are upset. They are upset that the Duchess is going to escape to meet Antonio. The cardinal says that he will banish the Duchess and Antonio from Ancona immediately. Scene 4 is set at the shrine of Our Lady to Loreto. Here we see that the cardinal gives up his cardinal's hat in a ceremony. He gives up his hat so that he can fight as a soldier. Antonio, the Duchess, and their children are banished from Ancona. This all happens in pantomime. The churchmen sing a song. They all exit, but we see that two pilgrims do not exit. They express their surprise as the Duchess has married a lowly man. But at the same time, we see that they express pity at the cruelty of the cardinal towards the Duchess. They talk that the Pope took the Duchess' dukedom from her. Scene 5 takes place nearby Loreto. We have already known that the Duchess of Malfi and Antonio are banished from Ancona. They are in a melancholic conversation. They are discussing their present situation. Now we see the arrival of Bossola. He has brought a letter from Ferdinand. The letter asks for Antonio to be sent to Ferdinand. Now the Duchess advises Antonio to escape to Milan along with their eldest son. Antonio accepts, and we see that they all say their farewells. After the departure of Antonio, his older son, we notice the entrance of Bossola and a troop of armed men. They approach to apprehend the Duchess and her remaining family. On the orders of the brothers of the Duchess of Malfi, Bossola places the Duchess under arrest. He then tells her that she will not see her husband again, and what we see is that the Duchess resigns herself to oppression. In the first scene of Act 4, we are back in Malfi. We are now at the Duchess' palace. We come to know about the discussion between Ferdinand and Bossola. They discuss how the Duchess is bearing the leadership of imprisonment. Bossola tells that the Duchess of Malfi displays patience and nobility. Ferdinand is not pleased. At the time of his departure, he curses his sister. We see the entrance of the Duchess. Now Bossola informs her about the intention of Ferdinand, that he wants to visit her. We can clearly remember the promise of Ferdinand about not to see the Duchess again. For this reason, she will put out all lights and she will converse with her brother in total darkness. Now we see the departure of Bossola and entrance of Ferdinand. Ferdinand gives the Duchess a hand of a dead man. We can understand why he gives her the hand of a dead man. He wants to upset the Duchess further. However, there is the Duchess' wedding ring on one of its fingers. After the departure of Ferdinand, Bossola restores the lights so that he can reveal another shocking sight. A scene of wax figures that represents Antonio and the Duchess' children as dead. This is another trick to drive the Duchess mad. Ferdinand wants the Duchess to go completely mad. He will have madmen placed near her chamber so that the sounds of their torture can irritate her. Bossola says that he would prefer to never see her again. But Ferdinand does not agree. Ferdinand sends him to Milan, where Antonio waits. In scene 2, we are still in Malfi. This scene opens abruptly with the Duchess of Malfi. She wants to know from Cariola about the noise. Cariola explains to the Duchess that the noises are coming from the madmen. From her, we also come to know that Ferdinand has placed them all around the prison. To the Duchess, it is actually comforting, and that though she is in depression, she remains mentally sound. We come to know from a servant that Ferdinand has sent several madmen to her, so that they can try to cure her depression by making her laugh at them. And we know it is a trick that previously worked on the Pope. The servant brings them in. We see their activities. They sing, they dance, and they act crazy. The madmen include the mad astronomer who lost his mind, the mad doctor who lost his mind due to jealousy, the mad priest, and the mad lawyer. We see the entrance of Boshola, disguised like an old man. The madmen leave the place. The Duchess cannot recognize Boshola. However, he tells the Duchess that he has come to design her tomb. She says that she isn't ill, and she reminds him that she is still Duchess of Malfi. Then we notice the entrance of the executioners. Then we notice the entrance of the hangmen. They enter with a coffin, cords, and a bell. Boshola tells her that her brothers has sent the present for her. Cariola wants to call for help, but there are none to hear her. We know that the only ones that might hear are the madmen. Ignoring the order of Boshola, Cariola wants to die with the Duchess. Then she is taken upstairs. Boshola tells the Duchess that she will die by strangulation, but it does not make the Duchess afraid, and now Boshola is surprised. The Duchess anticipates meeting her family in the afterlife. The hangmen stifle her. Boshola tells them to kill Cariola and the children. Cariola wants to know about her crime to deserve death. Boshola tells her that she is being punished as she keeps the marriage of the Duchess a secret. She protests when they try to kill her, but at last we see that she is killed. Boshola shows the dead bodies to Ferdinand. Ferdinand is unaffected by the dead bodies of the children, but the sight of the Duchess makes him cry. He berates Boshola for following his orders. Ferdinand admits that he was hoping she wouldn't marry again so that he could receive her fortune. Ferdinand is quickly turning against Boshola. He understands it. Then he asks for his reward. Ferdinand refuses to give him anything. What he can only do for Boshola is to pardon him for the murder. Ferdinand doesn't pay him anything. On the other hand, Ferdinand tells him to banish himself from his sight forever. Now we come to know about the signs of madness of Ferdinand. He leaves the place. Boshola is now greatly disappointed. He has done everything to ruin the life of the Duchess, but he does everything for no reward. The Duchess revives momentarily. Then Boshola tells her that Antonio is alive, not dead, as she believed. And then she dies. Boshola feels repentant of his deed.